Microsoft, from Windows to the cloud. In this episode of Business Wars, we're going to talk about Microsoft's journey from being a software company to one of the biggest cloud providers in the world. When it comes to the cloud, AWS is the undisputed leader, right? Well, not exactly. There are other players out there who are giving them a run for their money. Google has been investing in their cloud infrastructure for years now. And then there's this guy. Yeah, that's right. The lovable nerd with glasses that you probably know from The Big Bang Theory. He's the reason why Microsoft is so popular today. Just kidding. But if you took a guess, what do you think he's holding there? If you said Azure, you'd be wrong. It's just a Red Hot Chili Pepper CD. But seriously, Azure is one of the most important products in Microsoft's history. And it was a big part of the reason why they were able to survive and become one of the biggest companies in the world. Before we get into the video, like and subscribe. It really helps us out and means the world to us. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an exciting episode. Back in 2006, Microsoft was in a bit of a pickle. Their main source of revenue at the time was their Windows operating system and Office suite. But there was a problem. Since the dot-com bubble burst, people weren't buying as many computers. And since Windows and Office were primarily sold through OEMs, or original equipment manufacturers, which basically meant computer hardware companies, when fewer computers were being bought, Microsoft's revenue suffered. To make things worse, the open source movement was starting to gain traction, and Linux was becoming more and more popular, especially among developers. This put Microsoft in a precarious position because they had built their entire business on selling software licenses. If people started switching to open source software, then Microsoft could lose billions of dollars in revenue. At the same time, Microsoft knew that something had to change because even though their net income was still relatively high, their earnings per share, which is a measure of how much profit a company makes for each share of stock, was starting to decline. In addition, the industry as a whole was changing. Back in the 1980s and 90s, software was mostly bought and sold through retailers like Best Buy. But by the mid-2000s, the trend was moving towards online downloads. So Microsoft was left with two options. They could either try to find a new source of revenue to replace the declining revenue from their software sales, or they could just ride it out and hope that things would eventually go back to normal. Luckily for Microsoft, they chose option one, which was to move to the cloud. Now you're probably thinking, wait a second, didn't Amazon start AWS first? And you'd be right. Amazon launched their web services platform back in 2006, the same year that Microsoft embarked on their cloud journey. But here's where things get interesting. See, when Amazon launched AWS, their goal wasn't to become a cloud provider, but rather to use the cloud to cut costs. As more and more people started buying things on Amazon, they needed a way to scale their infrastructure up and down quickly. At the time, this was really hard to do. So they decided to build their own solution. Fast forward to today, and AWS is the undisputed leader in the cloud infrastructure market. But back in 2006, this wasn't the case. And it gave Microsoft a huge opportunity to enter the market early and become one of the first movers. Microsoft had already invested $45 billion into their cloud infrastructure, and they were ready to launch their own cloud platform, Azure. At first, Azure was mostly just seen as a backup option to AWS. But over time, Microsoft has managed to build out a platform that is just as good, if not better than AWS in some areas. One of the reasons for this is because Microsoft focuses on three main pillars: security, compliance, and trust. And that's not just marketing speak either. In fact, in 2020, a survey found that 64% of enterprises trust Microsoft more than any other cloud provider. Another reason why Azure is so popular today is because of something called hybrid cloud. Basically, many companies want to keep some of their data on-premise for security reasons, while others want to move to the cloud for scalability and cost savings. And Azure is uniquely positioned to help companies do both. In fact, 90% of the Fortune 500 rely on Azure for hybrid cloud solutions. Another reason why Microsoft has been so successful with Azure is because they've been willing to pay top dollar to attract and retain talent. For example, in 2014, they made an offer to acquire Nokia's devices and services business for $7.2 billion. While the deal didn't go through, Microsoft didn't give up. In fact, they went ahead and acquired LinkedIn for $26.2 billion, which was a record-breaking deal for the tech industry at the time. This showed the world that Microsoft was serious about the cloud, and they weren't afraid to spend big to acquire top talent. Today, Microsoft employs over 100,000 people in their cloud division, which is more than the entire population of Seattle. And these employees are some of the best and brightest minds in the industry. Many of them were previously employed by Amazon, Google, and other tech giants. This has given Microsoft a huge advantage because they've been able to hire away top talent from their competitors. As you can see, Microsoft has made tremendous progress since 2006. In fact, in 2021, they were the third largest cloud provider in the world behind only Amazon and Alibaba, and their growth shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. In fact, according to Statista, Azure's revenue is expected to grow from $266 billion in 2022 to $381 billion by 2025. This growth is being driven by a number of factors, including the increasing popularity of hybrid cloud, the growth of the Internet of Things, or IoT, and the increasing amount of data that needs to be stored and processed. But it hasn't all been smooth sailing. In fact, there have been a number of setbacks along the way. For example, in 2017, Microsoft had a major outage in Azure that lasted for several hours. This caused a lot of downtime for customers and resulted in millions of dollars in losses. In addition, Microsoft has faced criticism for the security of their cloud platform. In 2019, for example, a vulnerability was found in Azure that allowed hackers to access customer data. These are just two examples of the many challenges that Microsoft has faced along the way. But despite these setbacks, Microsoft has continued to make progress, and today they are one of the most respected cloud providers in the world. And it's not just customers who respect Microsoft either. Investors love it too. Since the launch of Azure, Microsoft's stock has outperformed Facebook, Google, and Amazon. In fact, since 2010, Microsoft stock has increased by over 1,000%. This is in stark contrast to the S&P 500, which has only increased by 260% during the same time period. To put this another way, investors who put $1,000 into Microsoft in 2010 would have had over $3,400 by the end of 2021. That's pretty impressive, considering that the same investment in the S&P 500 would have only yielded around $660. So what does the future hold for Microsoft? Well, it looks bright. As we mentioned earlier, there are a number of factors that are driving the growth of the cloud market, including the increasing popularity of hybrid cloud, the growth of the Internet of Things, or IoT, and the increasing amount of data that needs to be stored and processed. All of these factors are expected to continue over the next few years, which means that Microsoft is well positioned for continued growth. In fact, as we mentioned earlier, Statista expects Azure's revenue to grow from $266 billion in 2022 to $381 billion by 2025. That's a growth rate of nearly 50%. Of course, this is just a projection, and there are no guarantees that Microsoft will be able to sustain this growth rate. But one thing is for sure, Microsoft is well positioned for continued success in the cloud market. As the cloud continues to grow in popularity, more and more businesses will need a reliable and secure cloud provider, and chances are they'll choose Microsoft. After all, Microsoft is one of the most trusted names in the industry, and they have a long track record of providing businesses with the tools they need to succeed. The cloud has truly been a game changer for Microsoft. When they first entered the market, it was unclear whether or not they would be successful. But over time, they've managed to build out a platform that is just as good, if not better than AWS. In fact, today they are the third largest cloud provider in the world, behind only Amazon and Alibaba, and their growth shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. We'll be interested to see how Microsoft continues to evolve and innovate in the years to come. One thing is for sure, though, the cloud has been a major part of their success story. All right, that's it for this episode of Business Wars. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.